Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting of the Ojai City Council and the Ojai Redevelopment Agency, Successor Agency, a regular meeting for August 13, 2013, to order. And I want to let everyone know that our new chairs are out there. Hopefully they're more comfortable than the other ones. Good. They look a lot more comfortable. I'll tell you. For the audience to have to sit out there for the hours that they sit out there, hopefully the chairs will be more comfortable for you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Lara?
Here.
Councilmember Clapp? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Strobel?
Present.
Mayor Platt?
Here.
Councilmember Smith is absent this evening.
All right, if we could have Commissioner Lara lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a presentation this evening from the Area Agency on Aging Commission. It's by Ginny Rockefeller. Ginny, welcome. And I just want to point out that later on in our consent calendar, under item K is Ginny's reappointment to represent the city of Ojai and the Area Agency on Aging, the Board of Commissioners. And I want to thank you for being willing to continue with your assignment there.
Thank you,
so
too.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here. Go ahead.
Well, hello to the council and everybody else who's listening to me. For the past 2 years, I have been the City of Ojai's representative to Ventura County's Area Agency on Aging. And we shorten that up by saying VC AAA. We do a lot of meetings, but everything moves so slowly, as with every governmental agency, that I don't have a lot to tell you that there's been big changes. Being on the advisory council, I report once a month and sit in on their meeting, which lasts a couple of hours during the regular, working day. I brought the charter with me, which says that the VC AAA has about 8 things that they want to do, and I'll just mention them briefly. Number 1 is for seniors. Its charter is to bring together seniors, families, caregivers, the business community, policymakers, social service providers, and the public and private agency to advocate for improving and or maintaining the quality of living for our Ventura County seniors. And so we cover the following 8 points. People need adequate resources to cover their basic needs of retirement. They need affordable health care, suitable housing, low-cost transportation, opportunities for civic engagement. That's like cultural, educational, training, and recreational opportunities. Independent living and self-determination. Efficient community services. And the last one says, family caregivers will have access to resources and services to ease their burden of caring for their loved ones. So that's what the advisory council tends to, and it's so broad that they have divided all 20 or 25 of us, each of us 1 or 2, in some cases 2 because the cities are so large, come, and we've also taken positions on other committees, and one of my favorites is health issues. We are presently doing a survey. We're being assisted by some social work student interns from, I think, UCSB, and we're trying to find out what causes there are for nutritional insufficiency, which is a fancy governmental way of saying people out there are going hungry, and seniors seemingly more so, with children at the other end of the spectrum, more so than just the general population. So the survey hopes, with person-to-person questionnaires given by these social work interns, to find out if the causes are, I can't prepare food for myself because my stove doesn't work anymore, or I don't have a microwave, or I can't get to the store, which would be transportation, or I'm not even able to get out of my chair, so people have to bring food in. So maybe that's Meals on Wheels. But of course, the one we all fear is they'll just say, my money runs out before the end of the month. And that one's hard to fix. So I should be able to report to you next time I come on what kind of information this survey, which we hope to reach at least 1,000 people in the county, has to tell us about why seniors are going hungry. But on the other side, now the good news. I also am a part of the senior nutrition program, and we recently did, under a grant from the California Department of Agriculture, a free gift for seniors in all the farmers markets. They had a nutrition program, and it's administered by Patty Jager, who is one of the people who works for VCAAA, and I personally gave 150 seniors a coupon book worth $20 in $2 increments, and it was to be used just to buy fruits and vegetables at our farmers markets. Of course, I gave them out in Ojai, but all over the county, the same thing was going on in July. And so I feel like I've possibly made things a little bit better for the seniors in our own community. Of course, we strive to provide these coupon books to seniors who are the truly needy, but it's a difficult thing to ask people, are you truly needy, when you have a little gray-haired lady facing you saying, we heard you're giving out the coupon books this week. Ventura County has set the income needed just to make basic needs as of the year 2011. If you're a single person and you own a house but have no mortgage on it, you're still going to need $16,000 a year to live. If you're a couple with no mortgage and living in your own home, you're going to need $23,500. However, if you have no home, if it's slipped away from you, or perhaps you never were an owner and you must rent, it's going to cost you $25,000, and if you're a couple, $32,600. So, as I said, having the money needs met is one of the hardest things. I did bring our educational bulletin that I gave out with all of the coupon books. It's called Nutritional Education Materials, and it's bilingual. I'm going to leave them with Rhonda so you can have a peek at it too. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of the council? Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate it. Again, thank you very much for agreeing to serve for another term. The next thing on our agenda is the commission reports. I don't see any commissioners out there, are there? No? Okay. Then we come to the time for public comment. Public comment is a time at our meeting where we receive comments from members of the public on matters that are not on our agenda. Matters that are not on our agenda, we cannot take any action on them, but we will generally discuss it, refer it to staff to put it on a future agenda if that's what we wish to do. But except for emergency items, we can't take any action on it tonight. But I do have a speaker's card from Deborah Pendry. So Deborah, do you want to come forward? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Blatz, Council. So I'm speaking during the public communications because, number one, it's almost my bedtime, and number two, I wanted to go a little wider than the exterior lighting ordinance agenda item or your vote on the waiving of the solar system permit fee on existing residences. I think you know where the coalition stands. There's really nothing new to say. We do support both of those agenda items on your before you this evening. However, it feels imperative to keep a certain dialogue going with you as our official representatives and to ask citizens listening to give consideration to. It is of the utmost importance when weighing your decision and/or vote to ask, does this improve and sustain our environment, or does it impact it negatively and create a burden for future generations? So, at the risk of being overly dramatic, I want to address the difficulty of change in about 1 minute. For the last 1,000 years or so, first world civilizations have had a human-centric conquer and divide approach to existence. Then add to that the last 150 years basking in the glory and comfort of fossil fuel-based technologies and inventions, and you've got a pretty well ingrained social and cultural way of life. We get it. I myself break out in a cold sweat at the thought of quitting my organic, shade-grown, fair-traded coffee, but quit I must. And we Americans, who are 5% of the world population, using 25% of its resources, must quit being so darn obstinate about changing habits and changing rules. We have to counter the adverse changes happening to our air, water, and food, and the utter depletion of our resources. Arguably, the generations that exist now are in the midst of history making like no other era. Let us stop our fussing and embrace the challenge and creativity of figuring out how to line our trash cans with something other than thin, free plastic bags that are choking waterways and killing wildlife, or changing our porch lights that could guide airplanes in for a landing, but are throwing off the rhythm of nocturnal life. Or how can we have beauty in our yards without water-guzzling turf grass? Sure, we can think of these types of changes as inconvenient or sacrifices, but it's so much nicer and easier to do as a gift and a statement to the future that we got it and we cared enough to change. Thank you for listening, and thank you for caring and making the changes that you've been making for the betterment of our valley environment and beyond. And if that doesn't get me tarred and feathered and run out of town, nothing will.
Thank you, Deborah. I have another speaker's card for a non-agenda item, and that's Stan Green. Welcome, Stan.
Good evening, members of the council, Mr. Mayor. I had that down in the right order. My name is Stan Green. I live in the city of Ojai. I've been with Ojai Flow for a few years, and I have to ensure that you know this is not a worldwide conspiracy. There are just a few local people who want to restore fairness and hope to have for the future of Ojai. I want to thank Ojai Flow. I want to thank local organizations like the City Council, the School Board, the Board of Realtors, Chamber of Commerce, Ojai Valley News, Star Free Press recently, and many others, but I don't have time for those. We need to return local control over our water. I want to thank the Casitas Board for their courage, because we needed their help to implement a program to benefit the citizens of this city. I want to thank the people who supported us with contributions to help get us to this place, which is a chance to vote in our own best interest. It's for our future benefit, and we're being given an opportunity. Golden State Water has failed in the area of cost, in the area of competence, and certainly in the area of trust. It's time to restore fairness and hope. So I'm encouraging people, vote yes on Measure V. Mail-in votes are in process already. Walk-in votes will be on Tuesday, 2 weeks from today, which is the 27th of August. Please check your sample ballots for your polling place, as some usual polling places have been taken off the list of places to vote. So if you have any questions, call the county elections, give them your address. They will tell you whether or not you should just mail in or go to an alternate place to vote. Should you end up somewhere where they say, well, no, you can't vote here, then put a provisional ballot in and have them sorted out. We need everybody's vote. A democratic process requires that you not only decide, but that you vote. I encourage a strong yes vote on Measure V. This is our community. We want control over the water we use. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. And I think it's important for the public to realize that the city council has also come out in favor of Measure V, the issue regarding Golden State Water. And once again, we want to thank Flo for all of your efforts and time and energy that's gone into the whole process, along with Casitas. So thank you, Stan, and I see Dale here. She's active in Flo, so thank you very much.
Mayor Blatz?
Yes.
I would just like to mention there are only going to be 3 polling places for this election. I do have them at my office. I know one is the Gables, I think one's a Lutheran Church and Methodist Church. And then we do have a drop box here at City Hall, but people are more than welcome to call my office, 646-5581, extension 120, and I can help them find their polling place.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilwoman Clapp.
You can also vote at the county building, which I did. You just go downstairs in the county building, walk in, and you can vote right there. And if you haven't registered, you can register and vote right there as well.
Okay. I don't have any public speakers cards for anything else on the, I see Dale, raise your hand, come on up. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm Dale Hansen. I live in the city of Ojai. And 3 things. First, I just want to so support everything that Stan said. And the 3 voting places will be the Methodist Church on the corner of Church Road and the highway, the Gables, as you mentioned, and also the Baptist Church out on Grand. And some people have to do a mail-in vote. And if you're not certain, you can call the elections, and they'll tell you that. I also want to comment on what Deborah said, because I so strongly support what she was saying about the lighting and the plastic bags and all of that. And I'm so sorry to hear that I may have to give up my 1 cup of coffee. But the other thing that I wanted to say, and maybe this is in the plans already, I don't know, but I would really like to see us have a workshop on the second unit compliance, or otherwise known as the amnesty bill or whatever, because I think we need it. So many people in the public don't really understand how it works, and I think it's needed, and I hope we find a time to do that. Thank you.
I have a real quick thing. Dale and Deborah, there's a guy that grows coffee up in Santa Barbara now.
But it takes a lot of water.
Oh.
So does wine.
Darn.
Mr. Clark, what is the situation with the, for lack of a better word, amnesty program? I know that was part of our last housing element, but have we put anything together, any kind of enabling procedures or anything in place for that?
No, we haven't, and that's
Okay.
on the top of the list for the interim director when she gets started. So we included a description of the program in the housing element. We adopted an enabling ordinance or enabling language within
Right.
our ordinance, but we need to develop specific guidelines. And just to give you sort of an idea, we need to articulate to owners what they will have to do in order to make their unit legal. So, for example, they may have to make their electrical system compliant. And then we also need to have an ombudsman program so that they have a no-risk place to go to find out about those requirements.
Okay.
And so that's right at the top of our list behind the Cycle 5
Okay.
housing element.
All right, because some people that have approached me thought that it was already in place and that the procedures were already in place, and that's just not the case.
No, that's not the case, and I do think that Dale Hansen's suggestion of having a workshop as we develop those would be a good thing to do, just for outreach and public knowledge
I
and
agree.
input as well.
Thank you. I have one speaker's card that doesn't indicate whether it's an agenda item or the public comment, and that's from Steve. Okay, Steve, is it Weed?
Weed, yes, sir.
Come forward.
Lots.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I needed to check that box.
Yes, that's all right.
So, Mayor Blatz and the rest of the council members, first of all, I'd like to say, Betsy, it's just hard to present to you. What on earth happened to you?
I was river rafting, and I
Good.
was going down a rapid, and the paddle conked me in the eye.
There you go.
It didn't really hurt, but boy, I got a shiner, didn't I?
It makes for a great story.
I could say it's politics.
You need that about 3 weeks before election. Sorry, it's just.
I know, it's pretty obvious, isn't it?
My name is Steve Weed, and my family and I moved here about 3 years ago. We live on Oak Street, right here in town. And the reason I wanted to address the council today was to raise another issue related to housing. And I know that there's been a lot of work done on that recently because of mandates and also just because of the need to govern things. As we all know, rental property is in fairly short supply in Ojai, and that's because the housing stock is not very robust here. There are a few places, and we have farms and so forth. So it's rather limited as far as the housing stock for rentals. And one of the offshoots of that is that when someone rents a property and it doesn't happen to be in good repair, they obviously have the normal legal remedies to resolve that. But the challenge is that oftentimes those properties are still rented because the housing stock is in short supply. And if you look at the people that typically rent, they're everyday common folk, families. They're people who perhaps don't have the money to actually purchase a home. And so while they have the remedies, their time and their effort and their education sometimes limits their ability to really tackle those things as someone might want to do if they had the will and the resources to do that. So as a result, a lot of times families and individuals stay in property that is in fact in violation of codes, and oftentimes it's not serviced properly by the landlord. So I sent an email out about a week and a half ago, and I trust that all of you did have an opportunity to receive that. And what I did in that email was simply to outline a very rough draft about how that could be resolved. It included discovering properties are actually being used for rentals and implementing an inspection and fine fee if there is a housing violation that's on the books in a rental stock. So I guess I have to say, gosh, who is this guy talking to you guys? Well, number one, I've owned rental property for over 10 years myself. I know how to maintain it, and I know that that's the equitable thing to do. It's the fair thing to do. And when I suggest perhaps an additional fee besides a business license, I'm doing that because if an extra fee broke me, if it made me unable to rent, then there'd be some real issues with that. I wouldn't be a very good investor if I did that. So the email I sent to you is very general. It's nothing, that I'm considering finished, but I think it raises a really important point because the people that are at a disadvantage for housing need to have something done before they rent a property and suffer the adverse consequences if it's not maintained quickly.
Thank you, Steve.
Mhm.
Appreciate it. And thank you for the email.
Okay, good.
Any questions of Steve?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And I also received your email and read it. Would this be part of the fifth housing element cycle? Would this be a discussion to have during that time?
It's not really part of that, no. I think the focus of the fifth cycle is on programs that produce housing. So it'd be more of a one-off.
And the last thing is, I know for years, I don't know what it currently, but for years, we had a landlord-tenant dispute or resolution through the county, through the DA's office at the county. Is that still in existence? Is that still available to the public?
We'd be glad to check that out.
The one comment I would make, Ms. Strobel, is that concept was presented to me by Rob, and I certainly appreciate that. But again, the reason I feel like this is so important is that the very people who typically end up renting have other priorities in their life. So the emphasis of this type of approach is prevention You know, if you have a family, if you're working, well, nowadays, you know, 1.5, 2 jobs in a family, you can avail yourself of those procedures, but at what cost? You still have to find housing. So if you have a bad tenancy situation, you go to court, you sue them, is that landlord going to write you a letter of reference for your next property?
Okay. Thank you.
You understand my point?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there anyone else wishing to address the council on any non-agenda items? All right, moving on. The next item on our agenda is a consent calendar, and before I ask for a motion on the consent calendar, I'd just like to make a comment on 3 of the items. I've already commented on one. The first item is item 1A, and that's our warrants that we'll be approving, and I just wanted to point out for the public that the council had approved funding the Ojai Museum to the tune of $50,000, and in the warrants that we're approving tonight, that $50,000 payment is in there that will be going to the museum. I think that's important for everyone to know. The next item that I wanted to mention, I've already done it, item K, is Ginny Rockefeller, again agreeing to be on the, representing the city in the Area Agency on Aging. And then item J, within the consent calendar, is the appointment of Leonard Claife to the Ojai Fiscal Policy Budget Committee, and that's on for approval tonight. And once we have approved the consent calendar, if I see that Mr. Claife is here, if he wants to say anything to the commission or the audience, feel free to come forward. I'll ask for you to come up. Other than that, I'm ready for a motion.
I move to approve consent calendar 1A through M.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Blatt?
Yes. Mr. Claife, congratulations. I look forward to you being on the committee.
First time I've won an election in the city of Ojai. Thank you. You know, serving the community is something I've done in a variety of capacities since I've been here, and I will endeavor to do so in this position. We have a wonderful community, and I'm glad I'm in a position where I can try and help some. Thank you.
Good, thank you. All right, moving on to the item number 2 on our agenda, which is the public hearings. Item number 2 is the reintroduction of ordinance number 825, adding Article 16.5 to Chapter 2 of Title 10 of the Ojai Municipal Code entitled Exterior Lighting Standards, TA 12-02, and reconsideration of the companion resolution entitled Exterior Lighting Compliance Policy. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'd like to refer you to a chart that's located on page 2-47. This chart is one that compares the current code, the proposed ordinance, and the 2013 electrical code, and I think helps sort of briefly explain how these various measures would impact lighting in the city of Ojai. So first of all, the question of lights that are installed before 2004. Our current code was adopted in 2004, and it requires that lights be shielded and downward directed, but lights that were installed prior to 2004 are not affected by any of these measures. However, the second item is that unshielded lights that are non-essential must be turned off, and that is a provision of the proposed ordinance. So currently, if you have a outdoor light that's not shielded, this ordinance has an operating procedure that would require that you turn it off after 10 o'clock if it's not essential. And an essential light is one that's needed for security or safety reasons. The next item is lights installed after 2004 must be shielded and downward directed. And I just wanted to emphasize that that requirement already exists and is carried through in the proposed new ordinance as it's drafted before you tonight. The next item has to do with Tivoli lights. Currently, Tivoli lights under our current ordinance are permitted through the design review process. So you make an application, possibly with a landscaping plan, it goes to the Planning Commission, and they have the ability to review it, revise it, approve it, or deny it. The proposed new ordinance does not permit Tivoli lights at all. So if you adopt it as written, those would be prohibited going forward. The next item down is quantifiable standards being set for outdoor lighting. One of the main things that the Planning Commission added to the discussion as we went through this was to develop quantifiable standards. And so what this means is that we can go to a property line and use a measuring device and measure the amount of light that's being projected onto the neighbors. And if it doesn't meet the standard, it's not permitted. Then the next item, it has to do with fixtures. Under the 2013 electrical code, there's a standard for backlight, uplight, and glare. They call it BUG, backlight, uplight, and glare. There's a BUG rating for fixtures. And in commercial areas, fixtures have to meet a certain BUG rating for dark sky purposes, or they're not permitted on new construction. What some cities are doing or have already done is to make an amendment to a local amendment to the state electrical code that extends that requirement to residential neighborhoods. And we think that that is compatible with the proposed ordinance and is something that we should bring back to you in the future. We think that having people comply with both the BUG standards and the other standards in the proposed new ordinance is a compatible situation. And then standards for exterior recreational lighting are also addressed by the new ordinance and by the building code. So that's sort of a brief overview, and I know we've had this discussion several times, but I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions of Mr. Clark?
Yes, Mayor Blatz. I had a couple of questions. It was brought to my attention that a concerned citizen wanted to know if we're using the quantifiable standards that are pretty universal, if they're universal or not, or are they outdated, or are we using the current ones?
They're newly developed standards.
Okay. And then also, I just a comment on the Tivoli lights. I can pronounce it. Tivoli lights. I brought it up last time that this ordinance was introduced, and I'm just really concerned with the information that you provided us. The staff report really wasn't, to me, convincing that they add to light pollution. And I think that the way that it's currently written, that it could be permitted with design review, I think that's appropriate. I think that I'm in favor of the ordinance just in general, how it's presented. I think we need to act on it today, but I'd be I wouldn't be for prohibiting just in general. And I don't know how the council feels about Tivoli lights and if they prefer to be prohibited, but I really just am not comfortable doing an outright ban on them.
Any other comments? Questions?
I have a question. In the ordinance 2-11, section D on page 2-11, any outdoor light fixtures existing as of the effective date of this ordinance. Now, this is a language that Mayor Blatz had recommended we include in the ordinance. My question is, I'm a little vague on exactly what directional lighting is, even after having read the definition. And so here's an example that I'll use to give you an idea. We have an issue with a business at the end of Blanche Street, where on pillars there's a light fixture in a bowl, and then the bulb is exposed upward. would this part impact that at all? Could it be used? Okay.
The answer is no. This is an operating requirement for lights that actually swivel.
Okay.
So for example, if you have a spotlight on the side of the building and it can swivel and it's pointed outward, this would allow us to require the person to point it downward because it's designed that way.
And the only other thing is, on the same page, 2-11, under section 10-2.16.504, section C, it says, notwithstanding the exemption for signs in section externally illuminated building identification shall use top-mounted light fixtures which shine downward and are fully shielded. We had a situation with, I believe it was El Sudo. Is that? Sunido, El Sudo, Sunido, where they used reflected light. So it wasn't backlit, but it was in the back of the sign, reflected off of the building and out. And so what I'm wondering is, are we unnecessarily limiting ourselves when we state that externally illuminated building identification shall use top-mounted light fixtures which shine downward? And do we want to limit ourselves in that manner? And is the different lighting methods already addressed in our light standards? Have we already addressed Sunido's, because that's the one that brought it to our attention?
You know, I'm not 100% sure. I don't think that this is intended to eliminate the type of sign that Sunido has, but I think we should check that and make sure.
Well, why would we even include sign lighting in this part of the ordinance?
What this is saying is that the lighting that illuminates signs, shining back towards them, is shining down rather than shining up. Because when it's shining up, it creates light, dark sky pollution.
Right, but doesn't our sign ordinance already say that?
I don't know.
It probably does. So I would think that the lighting provisions of our sign ordinance probably are sufficient, and we probably ought to just say that sign lighting is covered in that ordinance.
And refer to the sign ordinance.
And refer to the sign ordinance.
And I agree with Mayor Blatz. I don't want us to limit ourselves by having just passed a new ordinance that limits us to using a top-mounted light fixture. So it would be my recommendation that we take that section out.
And then just cite the sign ordinance for lighting.
Well, it already states in the proposed ordinance that signs are not addressed.
Oh.
Now, you're not going to ask me where that is, aren't you?
Well, yeah, up above on
Oh,
C.
it's
Signs
C.
are not the subject of this article.
Yeah, right.
I don't know even why we need to then include it.
So I would rather see it taken out than have it limit us in a way that we really don't intend. Other than that, I'm fine.
All right, any other comments before I let the public speak?
I neglected to mention the resolution. We also have a resolution presented for you this evening, and the intent of that is to say that for the first year after this is effective, we're going to use voluntary type of measures to try and get compliance.
Okay. All right, I have one.
Mayor Blatz,
Yes.
I just wanted to mention that I was going to let you off the hook on that one. Because in the ordinance, or in the resolution, it does say that for the first year, we are initiating outreach, this type of thing, enhanced education and guidance on lighting, and it stops there. So that's why I'm also in support of the resolution.
All right, this is a public hearing. I have one speaker's card, George Berg. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tonight I'm speaking for two. My wife, Gail Topping, had a previously scheduled conference to go to, and so she can't be here. And when I'm finished with my comments, I'd like to read a very brief statement by her. We are both in favor of the resolution as the ordinance as presented tonight. One of the most important practical points that the International Dark Skies Association continually makes is that many dark sky friendly improvements can be made fairly simply, sometimes with economic benefits to the person using them and without reduction in either security or with benefits to the business. And I think that the ordinance in its current state does that. It generally makes improvements at little or no cost with no diminution of economic viability or security. I also feel the need to point out that the better is frequently the enemy of the good. We could continue making fine-tuning changes on the ordinance, but the one-year period that's proposed for education of the community is also an opportunity to find out whether there are any portions of the ordinance that need to be tweaked to improve it. And I think we'd be well advised to go ahead with the ordinance as written. There are a couple of changes from the previous version. One includes porch lights now, making them subject to all the provisions of the ordinance. That's probably a good idea, since porch lights that violate the ordinance are generally pretty obvious, and they would therefore undercut the ordinance. We don't really have any position on the Tivoli lights. If Tivoli lights are used, they could just be made subject to all of the requirements of the ordinance, so that glare and upward lighting could be taken care of. Having said that, I'd like to read Gail's statement. She says, "Thank you for the civic process. Over the 6 years of moving exterior lighting consciousness forward, many changes in city staff, city council, and state laws have occurred. We know now that more people understand how lowering and upgrading lighting can save money, energy, and create a more sustainable environment. During these years, some education has already occurred regarding the value of dark skies and more thoughtful use of exterior lighting. Experts from the International Dark Skies Association have addressed the council. Articles, blogs, debates have improved people's sense of what it means to reduce excessive lighting. The Ojai Valley Green Coalition is gearing up for the adoption of the exterior lighting ordinance with a more ambitious education program to make the community aware of the ordinance and the value of applying the provisions of the ordinance to existing structures on a voluntary basis. So what we hope is that the value of the ordinance will become clear to people who are not actually required to do it, but they'll simply say, this is a good idea. I think I'll do this next time I change my lighting. And she ends by saying, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of the democratic process. Democracy is slow, and yet it's still the best process we have. And she adds a final statement. Let me take this opportunity as well to say goodbye to Rob Mullane and wish him well in his future, and thank him personally for believing in Ojai and for working for the exterior light ordinance with grace and professionalism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to address us on this item? Seeing no one, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I'll bring it back to council for comment.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, during that part of the meeting, I checked the municipal code and the sign ordinance particularly, and I think the reason we have this provision in here is the current sign ordinance permits external lighting, but it does, and it says it has to be directed. It says external light sources must be directed and shielded to limit direct illumination of any object other than the sign, but it doesn't address lighting from below versus lighting from above. So this really supplements this language the current limitations in the sign ordinance, and I'm a little bit speculating here that rather than going in and changing this section of the code, we simply put it in here, and it covers it. So we're not changing any of the rules about sign lighting. The general requirement of no more than 10 candle power per square foot on illuminated signs. We have light intensity standards in the sign code, but they do permit upward lighting, provided that it is properly shielded and focuses only on the sign.
Right.
And so to the extent you wanted to prohibit that, this section would be appropriate.
Right, but we also, in the sign ordinance, allow for rear illuminated signs.
That's correct, absolutely.
So by putting this in here, it says that externally illuminated building identification shall use top-mounted light fixtures which shine light downward and are fully shielded.
Only if, I read this as only if you're choosing, the business chooses to use an external lighting on the sign. So internally lit signs aren't even covered by this.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment, and that is, I would like to take this out of this proposed ordinance. And if we're going to deal with signs, let's do it in our sign ordinance.
That's totally fine.
I would agree with that. I'd like to just see C come out altogether. Yeah, I think so. I have just two comments. One is I'd like C under section 10-2.16.504. Just take it out altogether.
The one we were just talking
Yeah.
about?
Yep. And as far as the Tivoli lights, I am of the same opinion as Councilman Lara. I think we ought to leave it in. If it goes to a design review and they're appropriate, I see no reason to have a full prohibition on them. I would like to see the language left in as it currently exists.
So that would,
I'd like to say something about the Tivoli lights as well. I think I understand what Councilwoman Smith was saying, that when it becomes excessive, it starts getting a little bit over the top. And so I don't know how you would address that or prevent that from happening. I guess it would be through the design review process, but maybe within the design review process, we could have some standards. Because, for example, and I love Suzanne's, I've got nothing against Suzanne's, but it's over the top. They've got so many Tivoli lights. And so I don't know how we could address it so it doesn't starting to become looking carnival-esque. But you still give the benefit of the Tivoli lights, and they're delightful when they're used with restraint. So is there some way we could do something like that?
yeah, I think that's something we could take up with the Planning Commission.
And just, Mayor Blatz?
Yes.
I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. If it's not offensive and we can deal with it during a design review or something like that, I don't feel it necessary to ban the Tivoli lights altogether.
Yeah. You know, one of the points that was made during the speakers, and I think it's a really good point, is this is our first step towards dark skies. And we probably will find a year down the line that there's things that we want to tweak. So, you know, if it turns out that Tivoli lights are a problem over time, nothing keeps you from going back and making a more stringent requirement. So I wanted to say, if you want to leave the existing language for Tivoli lights, then you should eliminate paragraph C at the top of page 2-17.
So the way that would read, Mr. Mayor, on section 4 would be simply the title 10, chapter 2 of the municipal code, section 10-2.806B is amended to read as follows. And C will just be dropped. And I would recommend on that other change also, we simply just reserve that. We aren't, I don't want to read letter every section in there so we'll leave that as a blank, as a reserved section.
That's fine.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
There is something in there that may be worth keeping, and that's the turning off at 10 p.m. because it's a non-essential light. So that would remedy some of the question of excess light. It's at the very
Is
last
that
sentence.
addressed somewhere else in the ordinance?
I think if Tivoli lights were approved by a design review that, and you wanted to limit the hours, you'd have to have a specific provision doing that. Otherwise, I think they could go beyond the.
We do say that non-essential lights are supposed to go off at 10, and I would say
But that's only
Tivoli.
existing, not
Okay.
new.
Well, I mean, is that something that the rest of the council would want to do? Have them go off at 10? Would save the business owner money, nothing else. I don't know. That would help with the light pollution. It would save power. No opinions?
I don't see any reason to have, if they're approved in the statute, I see no reason to tell them they have to be off by 10.
I agree.
Mr. Mayor, so we have what I consider pretty simple changes that it sounds like we're in agreement on, and that's on page 211 to eliminate paragraph C, and on 217 eliminate paragraph C.
Correct.
Am I correct here?
Yep. If there's no further comment, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to, well, our recommendation says reintroduce, but let me change that.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, that would be reintroduced since this is when it was
Okay.
introduced once.
I would move to reintroduce ordinance number 825, adding Article 16.5 to Chapter 2 of Title 10 of the Ojai Municipal Code Exterior Lighting Standards to establish a set of standards for outdoor lighting, TA 12-02, by one, asking the city clerk to read the title of ordinance number 825, and two, approving a motion to waive further reading of the ordinance and pass it to second reading.
A second with discussion.
Okay?
I have a question
Discussion?
for the,
Oh, and
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, and that, I should have said as amended.
As amended.
And by the as amended, that's with the deletion of paragraph C on 2-11 and paragraph C on 2-17.
Okay, we have a motion, it's been seconded. Further discussion?
I have a question. I'm not clear on this. Pardon me for not being clear enough, but if a CUP requires lights to be shielded, does that override the light ordinance? If the CUP requires more stringent shielding requirements than the light ordinance?
One that's currently been entitled, or one that comes down after?
Currently entitled.
Any specific, I would say any specific provision of, condition of a CUP about development standards would prevail, would
Prevail
remain in
over the-
effect, despite the fact we may change this ordinance. So
Prevail over the.
if it's a specific condition of approval.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Not, I wouldn't say not, for example, as a general condition, comply with all applicable zoning standards. Or something like that, I would say, no, that wouldn't be so. That meant just comply at the time. But if the planning commission or the council put a condition in a CUP that addressed number, size, style, location of lighting, that condition remains in effect, even if it's more stringent than what we have in our code
Okay,
now.
thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ordinance number 825, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ojai, California, adding a new Article 16.5 entitled Exterior Lighting Standards to Chapter 2 of Title 10 of the Ojai Municipal Code. Laura?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes,
Strobel?
Yes.
Blatz?
Yes. All right, moving on to item number 3. It's
Oh, Mr. Mayor, we also have a resolution, and I'll go ahead and make that motion.
I was ready to move on, too.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to adopt resolution number
36.
adopting an exterior lighting compliance policy which will guide implementation of the city's new lighting requirements.
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Strobel, for bringing that to my attention.
And I have a question. Do we need to include number 4 on that, which is direct staff to draft the proposed local?
That would be appropriate, yes.
Okay, so let me continue that motion and direct staff to draft a proposed local amendment to the 2013 electrical code, which requires that fixtures on new residential construction to comply with new dark sky requirements for commercial construction.
Okay,
Second.
all right. Any discussion on this item? Roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clap?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes?
Slats?
Yes. All right, the next item on our agenda, we're moving on to discussion items.
Take one,
Item
pass it
number
down.
3 is the introduction of an ordinance revising the process for administrative citations.
So Mayor and council members, I'm passing out a chart to help me explain this. And the city clerk has copies of the chart. I don't know, did we put them out in front or anything? So if anybody in the audience would like a copy, the city clerk has copies. So as far as enforcement of municipal code violations goes, one option that we have is to prosecute criminally. So a violation of the municipal code is an infraction, or in some cases a misdemeanor, and we can prosecute that. The second option that we have is to issue administrative citations, which are kind of like a parking ticket for $50, $100, or $250. However, the way the code is currently written, those only apply to certain types of violations like leash law violations, false alarms, noisy animals, and so forth, and they generally do not apply to zoning issues or building code issues. However, it would be beneficial for us to be able to apply the administrative citation to all municipal code violations because it's a very effective way and a very low-impact way of getting compliance when someone doesn't want to voluntarily comply. So one change that's being recommended is that we apply the administrative citation provisions to all municipal code violations. The next tool that we have is issuing a compliance order. And in our code, continuing violations such as zoning code violations and building code violations are considered to be continuing violations. And we're able to issue a compliance order to someone, and then if they don't obey that compliance order, the way it's set up is we can take it to a hearing board that doesn't exist, and the hearing board has the authority to impose fines and take other actions to seek compliance. And it's very important that whatever that is done at that level is something that's defendable in the event of future prosecutions. So the city attorney has looked at this and said the compliance order process should apply to all municipal code violations, and it would be a much more functional process if we used a hearing officer rather than a hearing board. And a hearing officer would be a private attorney or other expert who is, has expertise in conducting this kind of business and would create a good record for use in the court system if it came to that. So those are the changes that are being proposed to our administrative citation process.
All right, any questions of council?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
Okay, I'll keep this part at a minimum. It's just something that irritated me. And that is that what our attachment B was a red line version of the proposed ordinance. We took the time to strike out its and add his or her, but we didn't take the time to strike out board and add hearing officer. So that's just a little irritation. Let's move on from there. Okay, the staff report and the ordinance refer to violations commonly found in the zoning and building codes. With that in mind, how does the Building Appeals Board, which was we recently made appointments to, how does that fit into the overall intent of the proposed ordinance?
They are there as an appeal of interpretations of the building code. That's why the state law calls for the members to have some unique exposure, experience, and knowledge about the development and building process. So they're not an enforcement agency, they're an interpretation agency. And that's the role the Board of Building Appeals plays.
And I don't have it marked, but so we have a code enforcement officer issuing a citation. That code enforcement officer would then hear an appeal or whatever on that citation?
If
Are these two separate people?
Which two separate people?
I think she's referring to the hearing officer.
No, the hearing, okay, so the hearing officer, well, the way this would work now, and what we have currently in the books is just some not very specific drafting language in the ordinance. So for any violation of the municipal code, we could issue a civil ticket, administrative citation, which is issued by the code enforcement officer. And they have to pay the ticket, or they can choose to appeal it, which we have under our code right now, which goes to a hearing officer. The citation, the code enforcement officer doesn't do anything any further with the matter. Secondarily, in addition, if we have a very problematic and unique situation, normally where we want to order abatement of a nuisance, some building torn down sometimes, or some major repair work done to something. We don't want just someone to pay a fine. We need something fixed. It's really and the normal process of just citing someone for noncompliance isn't working. We would use the administrative order process, in which case we issue the same building official probably, or the code enforcement officer would issue an administrative order, and it says, take off that addition to the house, or connect your house to the sewer, or order money to be spent, and maybe pay a fine. But if they don't comply, then before any penalty is imposed, a hearing is held by the hearing officer. And the purpose of that is because the penalties that are going to be imposed administratively through that administrative order are much more expensive and extensive. And so so that's the reason for having the hearing process before the penalty or order is issued, so that the property owner gets due process.
Okay, and I want to verify that the hearing officer, not the code enforcement, that person will be designated by the city manager?
Usually we have, yes, that we'd hire them through the city hiring process. Usually their contract goes to you.
What I'm getting at is, so we have the city manager appoint a hearing officer. What I, as a council member, want to be sure of is that that hearing officer is objective, fair, equitable. And with this process, if an appellate decides that they have not been dealt with fairly, blah, 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 then they have given up their right to appeal to the city council?
No, they go straight to court. In both of these situations,
So the answer is yes. They have given up their right to appeal to the city council. They go straight to court, correct?
under the other one isn't appealable to the council either. In both cases, if the result of the hearing board decision or the hearing officer decision, their remedy is to go to court and have that order overturned. In all cases of administrative citations or administrative orders, we hold the administrative process, the penalty is imposed, and if the person cited isn't happy, they have the right to go to Superior Court and have that appealed. Because this is the important distinction here with citations versus entitlements is the citations is a law enforcement process. And generally, the city council should not be involved as a law enforcement agency. That's not the role of the legislative body. That's delegated to the city attorney and the city manager and the police chief. So this is a law enforcement tool. And the reason the council is the legislative body to hear appeals of policy decisions, issuing permits, denying permits, things like that. This is an enforcement of the law. Just like if I were to file a matter criminally, it's filed. I file it in Superior Court, and then of course if the defendant's unhappy with the outcome, they can appeal it to the appellate division, the Superior Court, and eventually the Court of Appeals. So law enforcement, the council doesn't have a role. The council is the policy advisor. Staff enforces the law.
Okay, all right. As far as combining our processes with Article 1 and Article 2, I can see the efficiency of that. What I want to be very, where I'm having a stumbling block is I would like resolution to an issue this side of Superior Court. And if you take this council out of it, so how can we be a part? One of the things I was thinking is that would be part of what we would use the, Hearing Appeals Board, the Building Appeals Board. Who are we going to use as a hearing officer, and as a council, what input do we have on that?
And I was going to say, perhaps an easy solution to that is that the contract to hire hearing officers should come to the council. So you would know who the city is hiring as a hearing officer.
Okay. Because I, as a council member, I do want to have control over that.
Well, I think that we would definitely have control over the hiring of the hearing officer, only because the city manager has to come to us for approval of the contract. But let me give you an analogy of the legislative and the judicial functions. The legislature makes laws with regard to the operative speed limit on a highway, you know. And then somebody that's speeding gets arrested. They don't go back to this California state legislature to argue their point. They have to go through the judicial system.
I got that too.
Okay.
I understand that. I'm just wanting to make sure that we do not lose control of the person we are going to have our citizens appeal to.
Excuse me. It's going to be a contract employee, like on demand, right, when you need them,
Yes.
basically.
That's usually how it's done.
Yeah, so we always approve subcontractors, don't we?
Yeah, there's a price limit there.
Yeah.
We have not always
Approve subs?
approved. There is a cap.
Right. he was
And
just
our
mentioning-
hearing officer
Right.
in the past has been used, paid, and this council did not approve a contract.
Because it was below a certain amount.
Yes.
And so you'd like to exempt that.
Why don't we
And
just
have
put
it
in this, for purposes of discussion, let's just say that prior to any hearing officer being hired, the contract or the council has to approve the hearing officer.
I don't care. Fine with me.
That's fully within your discretion to do.
Okay. I'm fine with
All right,
that.
let's do
I
that.
would like that.
Okay.
Mayor Blatz?
Yes.
I'm curious about the board, the hearing board, and the purpose and why it wasn't even formulated. Is it just, and I'm also curious that if this hearing board hits responsibilities, is it allowed to interpret the zoning ordinances in the city, or is it just focused on pure making the client or the violator comply with the ordinance?
Like I said, it's not clear, and the drafting is not abundantly clear. And we've had to fill a little bit of speculate a little bit on the history of this, but there was a highly problematic motel development in the city with a developer that simply would not finalize the building permits. They weren't following the law. And the problem was the normal citation process just wasn't working. So this was kind of crafted, I think, to deal with one specific problem. And we really never got institutionalized into a system. And the reason, and I'm the genesis of this part because I was asked to look at the code in terms of sign violations, and this is what we uncovered. But I have a lot of experience with what I'll call civilian hearing boards, dealing with everything from personnel appeals to criminal or quasi-criminal, and the hearings. And the problem, the challenge you have there is it's a judicial process. It requires interpretation and enforcement of the law, and in many cases, lay folks aren't skilled in doing that. They don't bring those tools to the process. And again, they're not supposed to be interpreting, other than there's ambiguity in what the law, I mean, as every court does when they have to interpret the law and enforce it. But it become a much more cumbersome, time-consuming, and potentially troublesome process with what the administrative record is when the decision's made. That's why I recommend a hearing officer, because it's much faster for the city, much less time staff spent putting on these hearings. So the hearing officer is capable of, retired judges, attorneys, usually those are the people that do this, often retired city attorneys who have a lot of experience in zoning and building and things like that, county councils. And so it's a much easier and faster process for the city and for the appellant too. So that's why, and I can tell you the trend is definitely away from hearing boards to hearing officers and more judicial type officers. That's where the trend is, and that's why my recommendation is to do this. We've never instituted the board, never appointed them. We don't have any rules or regulations, so this is the time just to revisit this issue and use a hearing officer.
It's just a little, to me, it seems like that's what we're trying to get at with the building appeals board, or.
Keep in mind here, the way the ordinance was drafted originally, it was focusing on zoning and building violations, and maybe a Board of Building Appeals might make sense. The way it's written now, it may not be a building code issue at all. It could be a zoning issue. It could be theoretically other things that we want to use this process for. So the Board of Building Appeals they're very skilled in a very narrow area. And under the state law, why we had them created is because folks getting building permits need an interpretive avenue to when they disagree with what the staff or the building official says the building code requires them to do. They need some remedy to have that decision interpreted and clarified and appealed, and that's the role of the Board of Building Appeals.
Okay.
Yes.
So this will deal with barking dogs or things of that sort?
Yes.
Just any municipal code violation?
Yes. Now, I'll tell you, I mean, this hearing officer, the second half of this, likely less than once a year, maybe once every 5 years.
And I have another question about that. He costs money.
Yes.
If the person loses the appeal, who pays for his cost?
This is a cost the city has to bear. It's a cost, because we're choosing, because remember, this is this process where we want to order some property owner or business to undertake some major remedial action and potentially pay some significant fines. So we're choosing that course, and so it is a cost. The city, it's just a cost of doing business.
Okay.
Mayor Blatz, real quick, what's the cap that allows us to look at the contract to hire? If we're only going to use 1 to 5, to me, that doesn't seem like, I don't know if we even reach that cap.
Well, I'm not sure what the manager's contract authority is. I think what the mayor and the mayor pro tem are saying here was just adopt a policy as to this.
5,000?
The-
Yeah, I think it's,
It all comes to us.
So just have the manager bring any contract for a hearing officer pursuant to this section, just bring it to council for approval.
Mr. Blatt? We're going to beat on this a while because I'm not happy yet. The language of the ordinance says violations commonly found in zoning and building codes. That is what the hearing officer would now hear. We should have had a more in-depth conversation before the mayor and I spent the afternoon of August the 8th up making 5 appointments to the Building Appeals Board. Because by taking out the appeals board out of this, haven't we just eliminated the need for a building appeals board?
If it's questions to me, no.
No, and I don't see it either. The Building Appeals Board is not going to it's never going to have people coming that have received a citation before it. The Building Appeals Board is going to come before it when they have been denied a permit in the preparation of a project. Or perhaps, and correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps it could come before a citation is issued, where there might be a question on some sort of an enforcement issue, but there hasn't been a citation issued.
Let me give you the best example. And boards of building appeals meet seldom. They're not they exist, they're in the state law, they're supposed to have one. Most often the question is this: someone is building a unique building, and the building code has either a structural requirement or a live load standard, or some standard about some numerical standard, and the architect proposes a different methodology to meet the safety, structural, exiting standards that are, they say that we can do it in a different fashion. And the building official has the authority in the building code to accept other methodologies if they meet the requirements of the law. And this is a case where the builder says, I think I knew this way, and the building official says, no, I don't accept, I don't think it matches, I'm not going to approve it. The Board of Building Appeals is a remedy where the developer or the builder can appeal that decision, denial of a building permit because their specifications don't meet what we say the code is. And the Board of Building Appeals considers that and either says, no, yes, we'll let you build it differently than the code requires, or uphold the decision of the building official, no, we won't give you a building permit for that. So they're more like the Planning Commission. They are into the interpretation and approval of permits. They are like the Planning Commission, but for the Uniform Building Code. That's the role of the Board of Building Appeals. And which is why that's why you want them to be builders and contractors and developers and people that have experience dealing with the process of building and building permits.
I'd like to, Councilwoman, I started to say Blatz, that won't work. Clapp mentioned earlier that this would deal with citations like barking dogs, blah, blah, blah. It's more than that. It is all of the code violations, Article 1, which is the barking dog, and Article 2, which is building and zoning. So it's far greater than that.
Yeah, but it's the entire muni code, correct?
Yeah, so anything that's a violation, we can
Applies to all muni code violations.
We can cite them criminally, we can give them an administrative citation, or we could choose to put them through this administrative order process.
What I'm after is I want to make sure whether it is a board or an individual person, that person be objective and that the person making the appeal has a fair hearing. That's my bottom line. How do we assure that?
Well, one is that the law requires due process, which is notice, an opportunity to be heard in a fair hearing, an opportunity to present evidence, to cross-examine witnesses. It is required to be conducted in a quasi-judicial fashion, and we are required to give due process as a matter of constitutional law.
And that would be the case whether we have an appeals hearing board?
Yes.
Or a hearing officer?
Yes.
All right. And I'm still right where I was. I want to make sure that that entity is objective. How do we best do that? But you've already answered it.
Any other?
That's it.
Okay. This is a discussion item. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the council? No? Okay. I'll bring it back to the council for further discussion or a motion.
I move to adopt ordinance amending Chapter 6 of Title I of the Ohio Municipal Code related to administrative enforcement of the municipal code by 1, asking the city clerk to read the title of the ordinance, and 2, approving a motion to waive further reading of the ordinance and pass it to a second reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, so I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Strobel, and I just wanted to come back. I don't know if I would want it to pass. I just want some clarity of whether or not we're going to have the ability to hear or have an opinion on who's going to be our hearing officer. So is it when it's read the second time, it'll come with that clarity, or?
I would, if you want to make that part of this, I'd make it add to the motion a direction to the staff that any contracts to retain hearing officer hired pursuant to this ordinance
Okay, and I will
be
add
taken
to
to
the
the council.
motion that the hearing officer is to be approved by city council.
Sure.
Okay. We have a motion as amended. Do we have a second on that?
A second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ordinance number 831, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ojai, California, amending Chapter 6 of Title I of the Ojai Municipal Code related to administrative enforcement of the municipal code. Laura?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Blatz?
Yes. All right, moving on to item number 4 is a revision to the historic landmark number 20, Arbolada House B, located at 715 El Toro Road, assessor's parcel number 020-0-062-070. Mr. Clark?
Thank you. The owners in this case are requesting a reduction in the scope of the landmark designation to the main residence only, thus removing the land and accessory improvements from landmark status. They maintain that having the designation pertain to the entirety of the property was not their original intention, and that the existing designation of the entire property interferes with their ability to make desired changes to the property. And it's noted that one of the changes the owners would like to make is the addition of a wall to the front yard. And this new wall is attached to the main residence and designed to help define the formal garden while adding privacy for the residents. This matter was reviewed by the HPC, and the HPC recommends that the application be approved by the council.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions of staff?
Mr. Mayor, I have a comment.
Yes.
I was council liaison when the Historic Preservation Commission reviewed this item, and they spent quite a lot of time on it. They put a lot of thought into it, and they really did agree that to recommend that they limit the footprint of the historic designation to the house itself.
Okay. Thank you for that input. Any other comments or questions? This is a discussion item. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak to the council on it? No? I'll bring it back to council for further discussion or a motion.
I'm ready to make a motion. Adopt resolution number 13-37. Approving the revisions of the designation of historical landmark number 20, Arbolada House B.
Second?
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Blatz?
Yes. Moving on to item number 5 is a resolution waiving fees for installation of approved solar energy systems for existing residences. Mr. Clark.
Thank you. This item came up originally at the July 9th City Council meeting, and it's a request that the council consider waiving the building fees for installation of approved solar energy systems. I think that there's going to be a fairly significant push in the Ojai Valley for installation of these systems, which is a good thing that has a lot of social benefits. And as is noted in the survey that was passed out by the coalition, Ventura County has already waived the fees and made this free. So I think if we were to have a fee, whereas everybody else in the valley doesn't have a fee, there'd be a lot of confusion, and it might create a bad taste in people's mouth. So we're supporting the request that the fees be waived.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Any questions of council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
Okay, we'll try to keep it short. I bet you guys are getting tired, too. In the packet, page 5-6, Larry Beam's email, he mentions that the he read an article on the Solarize Ojai, et cetera. And the program being proposed by Solarize Ojai charges an additional 20 cents per watt to be paid to their groups, which would be the Green Coalition and the County Environmental Coalition, to promote solar. And this amounts to $600 for the average 3,000 watt system and up to $1,000 for the 5,000 watt system. Okay, so if the city is waiving any fees, but it still has to do the inspections, it still has to approve, do the plan checks. Is there plan checks involved in this?
Yes.
So if the city is being asked to waive its fees, then let the Green Coalition and the Ventura County Coalition waive theirs also. If the idea is to promote solar energy, just having the city waive its fees doesn't seem quite fair.
So I just mentioned that this would apply to any solar installation, whether it's done by this group or any other group.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilwoman.
We've been giving a lot of exemptions to fees lately. Do you, off the top of your head, could you run by what we have exempted people from fees?
Well, I don't think we've we did create a no-cost appeal to the city manager of directors' decisions. We've reduced some fees. So for signs, for example, we reduced the fees because the fees were costing more than the sign was costing.
Yeah.
We also made a distinction between a simple variance or a simple design review and a complex one and charge a lower fee for the simple one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to encourage people to follow the process. So I think for the most part, where we have reduced fees, we've done it in order to increase compliance. And so there might be a trade-off between how many people actually come in and get a permit versus the lost fees on a few permits that would have come in otherwise.
We've waived some fees too. Some nonprofits and stuff. Haven't there been? The point I'm making is that I think we have to be careful because we keep, you know, we all know I'm a major environmental nutcase, freak, wacko. And I'm all for this stuff, but we are a business in a sense. We have to be economically healthy as a city. And so I'm kind of concerned that if we continue to erode our fees, that we're going to be creating some financial consequences we may find later aren't so great. Is that a possibility?
You know, a thought did come to mind. You could waive it for a specific period of time, and that might even create more of an incentive for people to jump in and do it during that period of time. So if you said for a year or for some other period of time, the fee's waived, and then it automatically is reinstated, yes, there'd be a financial cost to the city, but it wouldn't go on forever.
Yeah.
And it would create an incentive for people to act quickly.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
What I'm seeing and what I want to avoid is there truly a reduction in cost to the person installing the solar? Or is the fee that might go to the city to cover plan check, inspection, et cetera, simply being diverted to another group? Is there truly a reduction in cost to the person installing the solar panels, or is it just being diverted?
So I can, you know, I can't answer definitively, but I think that the Green Coalition would indicate that that you're getting a lot of benefit for the fee that they're collecting, because they've gone out and found qualified contractors that can do it for a good price and will do a good job. So they've sort of pre-qualified the contractor, whereas if you did it yourself, you'd have to go out and find a contractor which may or may not be able to do it for the price that they're able to do it for. So it's really a question for the Green Coalition, but I'd speculate they'd have that kind of answer.
Mayor Blatz?
Yes, Commissioner
Mayor,
Lau.
I've been the liaison to the Green Coalition. since the beginning of the year, and I've heard him talk about it. I've seen him talk, and I think that it's not fair to compare the money that they're receiving, because they're really advocating solar, and they're getting that money and throwing it back into the whole community, and they're not profiting from it and becoming a really big organization that just wants to be a for-profit identity. So I just feel like they're doing their due diligence, and they're really going out there, and they are. I'm echoing the words of Mr. Clark, that they are going out there and seeing what's the fairest price for the best quality. And I think they're doing an excellent job in what I've heard and see them working. They're really doing the hard work for Ojai.
I don't think, and this would be I think this is the question that you're asking, is whether or not the city waiving its $500 fee for the permit is ultimately going to end up in somebody else's pocket and not the city's. And I don't see them increasing their price by $500, knowing that the homeowner's not going to have to pay the $500 to the city. I guess that's always a possibility. But this money wasn't going to the manufacturer directly anyway. It was going to the permit fees were going to the city. So I don't think they're going to raise their price by $500.
No, I don't think they're going to raise their price. I'm just saying that the city of Ojai will still have to do the inspection, they'll still have to do the plan check, but we are waiving all of our fees as an incentive. But yet, according to Mr. Bean, Solarize Ojai is going to charge an additional 20 cents per watt to be paid to these groups.
Mm-hmm. But you don't have to buy from Solarize Ojai if you don't want to. You can always get a competitive bid. The main thing is that the Green Coalition, in working through the various manufacturers, has come up with Solarize Ojai and selected the vendor for the solar panels based on their bidding process and research. But you certainly don't have to buy from the individuals that are recommended. And then if you don't, and the bid is lower from somebody else, well, then you don't pay that fee.
But either way, the city would still have to do the work.
Correct. And I think
For
you have
no
to,
fee.
yeah, I think you have to look at it this way. The city could charge the $500 and then use that $500 to promote solar energy or energy consumption or whatever we wanted to do. We're indirectly doing that by waiving our fees. And we're waiving our fees to hopefully promote people doing the installation and doing it for $500 less than they would have to. So because we're waiving our fees, we're in essence promoting the fact that we would like to see solar energy in Ojai. That's our way of promoting it. The other way could do is to collect the fee and say, all the permit fees we collect for solar panels, we're going to use to promote solar energy in Ojai. Those are the two things you could do. If we don't waive the fee, then we're not really doing anything to promote the fact that we would like to see more solar energy in Ojai.
Here's another idea. We could waive it for a year, and then is it really going to take $500 to do all that, to do the review? Do you have a sense of how long it takes? Would maybe we just
Well,
lower the fee, have it be
yes.
waived for a year and have it be 250, takes 500?
Well, the reason I say that is that the state put a $500 cap on rooftop installations, and our revenues went down. So I think maybe it probably does average a little bit, around 500 or a little bit more to do the inspections and the plan check.
Well, I don't think we have any problem if we want to limit it for a year and revisit it.
Well, if we're going to waive it for a year, we should do some promotion. To let people know.
I believe that Solarize Ojai is going to do that. They're going to definitely be talking about the fact that we've waived our fee. I was at the kickoff meeting of that along with Steve Bennett, and
The ones that are moving over here on the corner?
I don't know.
Montgomery?
They're
Is that Solarize Ojai that's moving in over on the corner?
I don't know.
Yeah. And at that press conference, there was a lot of promotion being done by Solarize Ojai with regard to this upcoming year and the push and the community meetings and outreach and that kind of thing.
Well, why don't we waive it for a year then? Do a big to-do, and,
And that may help,
and
that may
then-
actually help speed
And
it
then
up.
bring it back in a year and decide whether we feel
I'd
that
like to
it's.
see that. And that'll also tell us how many permits we've actually issued within that year.
Mr. Mayor, if you, waiving it for a year is fine, but if we adopted this resolution waiving fees, we could rescind it, correct?
Yes.
So is there an advantage to waiving fees for a year?
My thought on that is that if people know that the waiver is going to expire at the end of the year, it'll encourage them to get it done before that happens.
And this is I'm left with the impression that this is this year's push to Solarize Ojai, because they have a goal of the number of units that they're going to install and that kind of thing over the next year. So I think that would be,
It's kind of a partnership.
yeah, I think that because they're looking at it over the course of the next year with how many they'd like to put in, they're having these 3 community outreach meetings, the last of which is, one of them's this coming Thursday, August 15th, 6:30 to 8, the Oakview Parks and Resource Center.
Well, maybe, too, if we do waive the fee for a year, we could request that they put it on their literature in our city seal.
They could, sure.
That the city of Ojai is generously waiving their fees for a period of
Yeah.
1 year.
That's fine.
And then that way, it gets out through their literature as well.
I just want to point out that this is going to, any company could do this. They could promote, okay, the city's not waiving their fees, so it's
Yeah.
just not Solarize Ojai.
Right.
It's going to be across the board.
And it's going to be a sales point to the people that are involved in solar panels. That they're,
Notify each.
they say, well, I think the companies are going to find out about it.
Or do we put an announcement in the paper, one of
Yeah.
those public announcements?
We could do that too.
Could we do that?
We could start with a press release, because I bet the press will pick it up.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to emphasize that if we are going to waive the fees for a year, I would very much like the city to get credit for that kind of assistance.
I agree. Any way we can publicize it would be good.
Well, the same as on the literature. I see Ojai Valley Green Coalition and Community Environmental Council. I'd like to see City of Ojai.
Yeah, too. But as Councilwoman Laura said, any solar company could do that as well. So notify all of them and send them a logo and give them permission to use it on their literature.
Well, I think the difference is that this is an entity that's being referred to as Solarize Ojai. Other solar companies could come into town and sell their solar panels, but they're not part of Solarize Ojai. Solarize Ojai has a particular vendor that they have picked.
So are you saying that we'd only give the $500 relief for the fees to the Solarize Ojai customer?
No.
Okay, so
But-
we could notify the other solar companies or through the press release, and they
Sure.
are also welcome to use the city's logo.
That's right.
and
I'm a little bit concerned about any old company that we don't know
using-
going
yeah,
door to
using
door
our-
and say, I'm endorsed by the city
Yeah,
of Ojai.
that's true, that's not good either.
No,
Yeah.
and I don't know whether the city wants to put our logo even on this, but I do think that,
Maybe just
that
a press
Solarize
release.
Ojai is going to be, naturally, they're going to be promoting the fact that if you sign up with them now, you're going to save $500 in fees.
So just have it be through press press release?
I think so.
Okay, that makes sense. Because you're right, you don't know. Could be Joe Blow's.
All right, is Solarize Ojai, the brochure says that it's a program. Is Solarize Ojai a specific company?
No, it's actually Solarize Ojai Valley, I believe. And it's a joint, it's done through the Green Coalition, in which they have selected a vendor to provide the
Okay,
units.
so it's a program.
It's a program. And it also, they have financing that goes along with it and that kind of thing.
And we can limit our waiving of fees? No, we can't. See, we can't limit it.
No, I don't think we want to limit it. What we were saying, what Mr. Clark was saying is that we were suggesting that we send all solar companies a press release with our logo and asking them to include our logo in their literature, that we're waiving the fee. But we don't want anyone to think that the city of Ojai is endorsing
Yeah,
that
because it
company.
could be maybe not the greatest.
But that we're still not going to charge them for a permit.
Okay, well, the initial discussion was on adopting a resolution, and I think what I've heard from my colleagues is to waive the fees for 1 year.
So,
that what I've heard?
yeah, so we want a motion to amend the resolution to that effect.
I move to adopt resolution number 13- waiving the building fees for installation of approved solar energy systems for existing residences for a term of 1 year.
So we'll actually change the language in Section 2, waiver of fees, to indicate that the effective date of the resolution is when it will start, and 1 year from then is when it will end.
Right.
Okay.
And do you want to add to that motion? I
To
don't believe it's
a
part of
press
it.
release?
To direct the city manager to
And also
prepare a press release.
to direct the city manager to prepare a press release to inform citizens and citizens that the fee waiver will come into effect and the dates in which it will come into effect, I guess.
Okay.
Get it? Okay.
All right. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clap? Yes. Strobel?
Yes.
Flats?
Yes. All right, we're going to adjourn as the Ojai City Council and reconvene as the Ojai Redevelopment Successor Agency. And I will entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
I'll move to approve the disbursements and warrants successor agency.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clap?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Flats?
Yes. We're going to adjourn as the Ojai Redevelopment Successor Agency, reconvene as the Ojai City Council. Oh, there were no discussion items for the agency. Reconvene as the Ojai City Council, and reports from council members. Commissioner Lara, do you have anything tonight?
No.
Councilwoman Clapp.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
Well, I've already related that I am liaison for historic preservation. I also attended the Ventura County Animal Services meeting, And they have a couple of programs they're going to be promoting. And I promised Mr. Clark that I would get those into him, and I haven't done that, so I've kind of been negligent on that. I'll get the 2 programs they have in mind into him, and the County Animal Services is going to probably want to do a presentation before the council. That's about it.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
We had scheduled a special meeting on September 9th to review the housing element, and because of some scheduling conflicts, we may have to change that. So I've asked the consultant for some more dates, and when I find out those, I'll ask Rhonda to poll the council and see what will work.
Okay. Mr. Fletcher?
Nothing, sir.
It's always nice to have the sergeant with us. How you doing? Sergeant Arthur?
Very good, thank you. Just looking forward to the new school year starting and the continued partnership with the school districts and assigning deputies to individual schools to be visible and to develop a relationship with the principals.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How's it going at the skate park?
I think it'll always be a challenge, but we have been issuing citations. I'll give you one quick example. One of the parents was there today with a child I could hardly see above the fence, and he was too young to ride a skateboard, but old enough to ride a scooter. So I explained to the mom the rules and gave him a sticker and not a ticket, because I don't think the kid was much more than 3 years old. So very good intentions. It's great to see someone out enjoying themselves. But it'll always be a challenge to give a ticket when you see people out either on bicycles or on scooters. They're out, they're active, but they don't realize the value of wearing a helmet or what's safe for them. So it'll always be a challenge, but we have been enforcing the rules more.
Do you think the rules about what's allowed in the skate park are prominent enough that people are seeing them, or do you think they're just not reading them?
Well, as you enter that fenced area, it's right there. And I've given umpteen warnings. Most people, when you'd roll up, the kids that are in there, you could just see it in their face. They know they're breaking that rule. So I don't think it's an issue of notification. I think they know. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sergeant Arthur, have you written any citations for BMX bikes or scooters in the skate park? Have any citations been written?
I personally wrote 5 about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, for the bikes?
Bikes and scooters.
Thank you.
Anything else for the sergeant? No? Ms. Mears, anything this evening? No. Okay. Mr. Grant? How are you tonight?
Good evening. I thought I'd throw in a little marketing for the Ojai trolley. You probably heard that the Ojai trolley is running a free, it's in cooperation, of course, with the Casitas Municipal Water District, and the fares are free out at Lake Casitas now. So we had, as expected, there was a huge jump in the ridership. Instead of typically about 40 riders, we've been having this program. Just shot up last week when the first free weekend, up to about 250 riders on that day. So that's a big jump. That's kind of what the program was hoping to do. So Casitas is really happy with that, and that might bring the program around. So hopefully anybody out there is aware of that and would help ride it. And I thought I'd throw in a separate item was on Fox Street on the south end in the cul-de-sac. You might have noticed that that's been repaved out there, and I wanted to thank the Ojai Valley Sanitation District. They had some settlement problems with an old manhole there that we discussed with them, and they stepped forward and worked with the county's bike path group, and they repaved that whole pocket for us. So that was no cost to the city, and I think it's a nice improvement out there.
All right, thank you. Okay. Our city clerk, Rhonda, anything?
Just the election, get out and vote August 27th.
Okay, thank you. Anything more to come before the council tonight? Hearing nothing, we're adjourned.